right now is a reflection of your standards. Nothing more, nothing less. You may argue, you may blame fate, you may complain of circumstance, but look honestly and you will see the truth. You are living exactly what your standards allow. If your standards permit poverty, you will remain poor. If your standards tolerate fear, you will drift in fear. If your standards excuse mediocrity, your life will mirror mediocrity. Life will not rise to meet your wishes. It will sink or rise to meet your standards. Think of it. A man says, "At least I have a job. At least I can get by." That is his standard, survival. And survival is all he will ever know. Another man says, "I demand abundance. I demand influence. I demand freedom." That becomes his standard. He cannot accept less. So he labors, he persists, he commands until life delivers. Your entire destiny hinges on what you will no longer tolerate, what excuses you refuse to permit, what compromises you will not make. Raise the standard, and you raise your life. Keep it low, and no law in heaven or earth will lift you higher. Picture this. One man comes home at night, weary, but he sinks into a chair and says, "At least I made it through the day." His children watch him silently. They learn his standard, that life is something to endure. Years later, they will repeat his pattern. Another man comes home equally weary, but he refuses to stop until he has written his decree, reviewed his plan, spoken his affirmations. His children watch him too. They learn his standard, that life is something to conquer. Years later, they will repeat his pattern. Which man are you? Do not deceive yourself. Standards are contagious. Your family, your friends, your colleagues, they catch them from you. If you live small, they will believe small. If you live high, they will rise higher. When you raise your standards, you raise not only your life, but the lives of everyone who looks to you. Every story of greatness is the story of a man who raised the standard. Lincoln refused to accept division as permanent. Carnegie refused to accept poverty as his destiny. Ford refused to accept impossible as a verdict. Edison refused to accept 10,000 failures as final. Each raised the standard, and the world was forced to rise with them. Now I must warn you, the standard you set is not in words. It is in what you practice daily. You may say, "I demand more." But if your habits are weak, if your persistence is short, if your faith is faint, then your true standard is still low. Life listens not to your lips, but to your discipline. So I challenge you now, what will you no longer accept? What poverty, what fear, what excuse, what drift? Draw the line today. Say to yourself, "I will no longer drift. I will no longer excuse. I will no longer beg. My standard is definiteness. My standard is faith. My standard is persistence. My standard is mastery." Say it until you feel it burn. Say it until your habits align. Say it until the world itself recognizes that you will not bow to mediocrity. Then watch as doors open, allies appear, and fortune hastens to serve you. Your life will not change because you wish it. It will not change because you wait. It will change only when you raise the standard and refuse to live below it another day. Part 1. The Hidden Law of Standards. Life does not rise to meet your wishes. It rises or sinks to meet your standards. Wishes are idle. Standards are law. You may dream of riches, but if your standard tolerates poverty, you will remain poor. You may hope for influence, but if your standard accepts fear, you will drift in fear. Standards are silent decrees, written not in words but in conduct, that govern your destiny more powerfully than fate. I have studied thousands of men and women and discovered that success is never an accident. It is the direct result of the standards one sets for himself. One man says, "I will accept enough to survive." His life reflects survival. Another man says, "I will not rest until I command abundance." His life reflects abundance. Fate did not choose between them. Their standards chose.
Pause for a moment. Take a deep breath. Sit up straight. Pay close attention. If you can, grab a journal or open a notes app and capture the ideas that strike you. And if you want to get the most out of these teachings, don't forget to check the first link in the description.
Consider two men returning from labor. One collapses into a chair and sighs, "At least I made it through." His children watch and learn that endurance is all life offers. Another, equally weary, takes up his pen and writes his decree before retiring. He refuses to permit drift in his household. His children watch and learn that life is to be conquered. Both men teach standards, one of weakness, the other of mastery. Abraham Lincoln rose from poverty not by wishing, but by raising his standard. He refused to accept division as the permanent destiny of his country. Many men wished for unity, but they tolerated compromise. Lincoln's standard was higher. He said with his life, "This nation shall not perish." He endured failures, defeats, ridicule, yet his standard did not bend. That standard lifted a nation. Andrew Carnegie began as a poor boy, working in a factory for meager wages. Many around him said, "This is our lot." Their standard was survival. Carnegie said, "I will not remain here. I demand wealth. I demand influence." He raised his standard above his surroundings. He endured labor, studied men, served beyond pay, and persisted until fortune surrendered. His standard, not fate, chose his destiny. Say aloud, "My standard is mastery. I refuse mediocrity. I will not accept drift. I will not excuse fear. I will not tolerate poverty. I raise my standard, and my life must rise with it. My standard is definiteness. My standard is persistence. My standard is faith. Because I have raised my standard, I cannot live below it. Because I refuse mediocrity, I must command mastery. Standards are invisible yet irresistible. They are not what you claim, but what you prove. You may say, "I demand greatness," but if your habits are weak, your standard is weakness. You may claim, "I will be rich," but if you tolerate excuses, your standard is poverty. Life listens not to your lips, but to your daily discipline. Standards are laws written in action, enforced by results. The drifter sets no high standard. He says, "I will take what comes." He excuses his weakness by blaming chance. He waits for opportunity, yet wastes every day in mediocrity. His standard is low, and so his life remains low. The master sets high standards. He says, "I will create what I demand." He tolerates no excuses, accepts no drift. His standard is high, and so his life must rise. Your standard is the line you will not cross downward. If you say, "I will never allow myself to go hungry," you will find a way to eat. If you say, "I will never allow myself to drift," you will act with definiteness. If you say, "I will never accept mediocrity," you will persist until mastery is achieved. Your standard is the floor of your life, and you may raise it at will. Consider the immigrant who arrives with nothing but raises his standard to abundance. He demands more of himself than survival. He works, saves, learns, persists until his household reflects his new standard. Another immigrant arrives, works equally hard, but says, "At least I get by." His standard is survival, and survival is all he ever secures. Same chance, different standard, different destiny. Say again, "My standard is mastery. I refuse mediocrity. I will not drift in excuses. I will not beg of chance. I will raise my line daily until mediocrity cannot live in me. My family will inherit my standard. My companions will reflect my standard. My world will bend to my standard. I raise it higher, and life must rise with it. I refuse mediocrity. Therefore, I command mastery." Standards are contagious. Children catch them from parents. Employees catch them from leaders. Nations catch them from men of influence. Lincoln raised his, and a nation followed. Carnegie raised his, and an industry followed. Ford raised his, and transportation followed. Edison raised his, and the world followed into light. Standards do not remain private. They radiate outward, lifting or lowering all who touch them. Your excuses are nothing more than confessions of your standard. When you say, "I am too tired," you confess that your standard is weakness. When you say, "I will try," you confess that your standard is hesitation. When you say, "At least I survive," you confess that your standard is survival. Raise your speech. Say, "I demand more. I will persist until. I will not excuse. I will not drift." The law is plain. Your life will not exceed your standard. A man with a low standard may stumble into fortune, but he will lose it. A man with a high standard may begin in poverty, but he will rise. The law does not fail. Standards govern destiny more powerfully than fate, for fate bends to the man who raises his standard. Standards are destiny. Raise them, and you raise your life. So I charge you now, write one thing you will no longer tolerate. Say aloud, "I will no longer accept mediocrity. I will no longer drift. I will no longer